Welcome back to the Action Potential podcast. If you're new here, hi, I'm Anna. I have a master's in neuroscience and cognition, and I've been clinically diagnosed with ADHD. And I share science-backed, down-to-earth strategies to help us live better lives with ADHD. So let's dive in. How many times have you been told that you should do something because, it's good for you in the long run, and then you felt bad because you can't seem to get the task done? Exercising, eating healthy, brushing your teeth, studying, cleaning your house, all of these are necessary care tasks that many people struggle to do. Why? Because not everyone finds doing them enjoyable. In fact, for some people, these tasks are not just boring, but uncomfortable, overstimulating, or even painful. Cue the shame. People will think I'm lazy. My doctor and my dentist will think I don't care about my health. They'll think I'm a waste of potential. If any of these struggles or thoughts sound familiar, you are not alone. These tasks are good for us, but only if we can figure out a way to actually get them done with some degree of regularity. For many of us, the idea of the outcome, like the fitter body, the clearer mind, the healthier teeth, the better grades, the clean house, none of that is enough to motivate us, even though we know that the outcome is good for us and we genuinely want it. Knowledge and wanting are not enough to get that outcome, because there is a giant obstacle in the way: the task process itself. In the previous episode, we chatted about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and I shared 4 simple questions that you can use to build intrinsic motivation for basically anything. In this episode, we're following the same theme, but through a slightly different lens: process motivation versus outcome motivation. We'll look at what the research says makes a task process intrinsically motivating, and how to want, like, and even seek the process of a task by modifying it to fit you better. But first, if you could do me a huge favor and leave a 5-star review or hit the subscribe button, it'll only take a couple of seconds, and it really helps me bring science-backed and experience-tested content to everyone with an ambitious but overwhelmed brain. Also, side note, I am doing this audio only because I've been a bit perfectionistic about getting videos uploaded because of editing them and because I need to look good and all of that. So we're doing audio only for a while, but if you like this content, I promise you I will be back to doing video episodes as soon as possible. Now, to get the most out of this episode, I do want you to keep our 4 intrinsic motivation questions in mind. So number 1, what is the most interesting thing you learned from this post? Number 2, why is process versus outcome motivation important in the real world? Where do you notice it? Number 3, how does process versus outcome motivation apply to you, your life, your loved ones, and your goals? And number 4, what else would you like to explore about process versus outcome motivation? Now, I know I'm not the first person to talk about process versus outcome motivation, but still, the realization of how deeply it applied to my own life hit me very clearly about 2 years ago, and it's what motivated me to make a few Instagram posts about it back then. I've always been an active person, despite not being really regarded as a sporty child, largely because of what activity I chose to do, but that's a conversation for another day. For as long as I can remember, I've really loved to dance. Am I particularly talented, flexible, or elegant? Absolutely not. I have many limitations that make me look a little bit more like a mushroom than a prima ballerina. Nevertheless, I have consistently considered myself a recreational dancer for more than 20 years. I enjoyed dancing in various styles as well. As a teenager, there was a phase of my life where I danced more than 9 hours a week, and part of that involved 4-hour rehearsals on Saturdays that were incredibly challenging, both physically and mentally. And yet, I stayed committed and consistent, not because I was chasing a particular outcome, but because I really enjoyed the process. Did dancing that much benefit my health and fitness? Absolutely. But knowing that exercise was healthy was never the motivating factor. It was just a nice side effect of a hobby I genuinely enjoyed. Despite moving my body often and growing through many physical challenges, you would still never catch me choosing running as my method of exercise. I've heard all the magical benefits of running from friends. I've read about them in research papers. I've lived vicariously through fictional characters and content creators describing the euphoria they feel when they get a runner's high. And I was forced to do it for 15 years in school, although anybody who knows me knows that my running mostly involved sobbing and very determined walking. It's not that I doubt that running would be good for me. I even know that if I trained properly, I could probably become maybe not completely terrible at it. But it doesn't matter. The process is so deeply unpleasant to me that I avoid it at all costs. Every few years, I do try to stay open-minded, and that's how I ended up filming those videos 2 years ago. It was another brief attempt at running that served mainly to remind me how much I dislike it. My partner had invited me to join him for a 5-kilometer run. I gave it a go, and I finished it, largely thanks to his constant encouragement in the face of my ranting and regrets. And afterwards, despite feeling proud and despite feeling physically good, I still caught myself saying very clearly, I do not want to do that again. It wouldn't have mattered if finishing that run came with a reward. No outcome, no matter how good, would be worth enduring that process repeatedly. And that's the point. Running is a great form of exercise for humans in general, but the best way to exercise is the method that you'll actually get yourself to do. For me, that's dancing, it's music-based strength classes, it's yoga, it's hiking, it's Pilates. In all of these activities, I like knowing there's a good outcome, like a healthier body and mind and progress towards new skills. But most importantly, I delight in the activity while it's happening. Knowing the benefits of an activity does not magically make the process tolerable, and struggling to maintain difficult or uncomfortable healthy habits is not a personal failing. I've found that intentionally designing my life to include self-care activities with enjoyable processes helps me stay consistent, and it helps me actually enjoy the process of becoming healthier. The tension, of course, is that outcomes do matter, and not every unpleasant task, like running, has a clear, enjoyable alternative like dancing. So, how do we modify tasks to make their processes more tolerable or even motivating? Let's have a look at what the research says. So what makes something intrinsically motivating? Motivation is not about valuing the outcome. According to motivation researchers Ryan and Dacey, intrinsic motivation refers to the spontaneous tendency to seek out novelty and challenges, to extend and exercise one's capacity, to explore and to learn. In other words, when people are intrinsically motivated, they engage in an activity because it feels interesting or satisfying in itself, not because they're trying to gain a reward, avoid a punishment, or achieve a particular outcome. In a 2017 review, DiDomenico and Ryan emphasized that intrinsic motivation is by no means automatic. It's not something you either have or don't have. Instead, it depends on whether certain basic psychological needs, the ones central to self-determination theory, are being supported. The two most relevant needs here are competence, which is feeling capable and effective. It's the sense that you're growing, improving, and meeting optimally challenging demands. And the other one is autonomy, which is feeling volitional and self-directed. It's the sense that your behavior is chosen, authentic, and not the result of internal pressure or external coercion. Now, it's important that we go over some definitions quickly, because if you read the intrinsic motivation literature, certain concepts show up again and again, and it helps to have an intuitive sense of what they mean before we talk about them. So exploration is actively engaging with something to see what happens. It's like poking it and testing it and trying things out. Play is a low-stakes form of engagement driven by curiosity rather than obligation. Curiosity is the pull you feel towards missing information. It's wanting to know what's going on. Value is the perceived importance or meaningfulness of an activity. Salience, this is an important one, is how much something stands out or captures your attention. Mastery is the process of getting better at something over time. Novelty is when you're exposed to something new, surprising, or not fully predictable. And dopamine, this is going to be an oversimplification, but it's a neuromodulator involved in learning motivation and responding to novelty, surprise, and prediction errors. It's not just about pleasure. Let's chat a bit about novelty and exploration. Novelty in particular plays a crucial role in intrinsic motivation, but not just any novelty. For a task or stimulus to spark intrinsically motivated curiosity, exploration, and mastery, it needs to present what researchers call optimal challenges or optimal inconsistencies with your existing knowledge. Optimal here means Goldilocks level, so not too easy, not too hard, not completely familiar, but not entirely foreign. Tasks that are too easy are boring, and tasks that are too difficult are inaccessible. Intrinsic motivation lives in the narrow space between the two. This makes sense when you consider how the brain responds to uncertainty. When we encounter something novel, information is missing. And until we resolve that uncertainty, we don't know whether the situation signals potential reward, which would be exciting, or potential threat, which would be anxiety-inducing. Because excitement and anxiety share overlapping neural circuitry, novelty creates a motivational conflict. Should we try to approach this, or should we try to avoid it? When novelty is optimal, interest and positive excitement win out over anxiety and boredom, nudging us into an exploratory state. In that state, intrinsic motivation becomes self-reinforcing. We seek out new challenges, we look for patterns, we look to create opportunities to learn, and it's not just to reduce anxiety, but it's because the process itself becomes rewarding. Older research from the 1980s, but it's still surprisingly robust, suggests that factors like positive feedback and opportunities for choice enhance intrinsic motivation, whereas things like negative feedback, surveillance, and rigid deadlines tend to undermine it. Now, if you're thinking, but Anna, I need deadlines and consequences and body doubles to get anything done, that's fine. We talked about that in the last episode. External motivators can be useful, but the problem is relying on them alone, which can gradually erode your intrinsic motivation rather than support it. So far, the picture looks like this. Intrinsic motivation thrives when there is competence, autonomy, optimal novelty, and supportive feedback. Now, neuroscience work on exploration adds another layer here. From a neuroethological perspective, mammals appear to be hardwired with a general purpose seeking system. This is a dopaminergic network that keeps us engaged with our environments, even in the absence of immediate rewards. This system basically drives curiosity and exploration until something useful, interesting, or learnable is discovered. In other words, we don't just explore for rewards. Exploration itself as an activity is motivating. Now, just another quick disclaimer for simplicity's sake. We mainly focus on dopamine-related systems in this episode, and this is not the full picture, but I don't want to overwhelm or confuse you. Norepinephrine is also a big part of the puzzle, especially regarding novelty, challenge, and salience. In fact, it was a huge part of my master's thesis. So please just drop a comment if you're interested in the role of norepinephrine, and we can definitely chat more about it. So let's move on to process motivation, flow, and feedback. The way I think about process motivation is that it sits somewhere between standard intrinsic motivation and Csikszentmihalyi's 1990 concept of flow, which is a state of deep absorption, optimal challenge, and non-self-conscious enjoyment. When people experience flow, or what ADHD people like to call it as a good hyperfocus, their behavior is autotelic, which means it's done for its own sake. Now, research on flow highlights another key ingredient of process motivation: continuous feedback. People stay engaged when they can track progress, adjust their actions, and see the effects of what they're doing in real time. Tasks that are intrinsically motivating tend to provide clear, proximal goals and immediate feedback. And that feedback doesn't need to come from another person. Take the example of a crossword. Your answer either fits in the boxes or it doesn't. And if you look at choreography, a movement either looks the same as what the instructor did or it doesn't. The task itself provides feedback on how you're doing. Now, another note on dopamine is that all of this ties closely to how dopamine functions in learning and motivation. The dopaminergic neurons respond not only to rewards, but to reward prediction errors and to salience, or surprise more generally. Feedback creates exactly these moments. It gives the brain something to update its models against. Now, I want to emphasize here that dopamine is a lot more complex than a simple reward chemical. It's more like a learning and updating signal. And different groups of dopaminergic neurons respond to different things. So some dopamine neurons are value coding. They respond when something is better or worse than expected. If it's a surprisingly good outcome, then dopamine goes up. If it's a surprisingly bad outcome, then dopamine dips. But other dopamine neurons are salience coding. They have a dopaminergic response to the surprise itself, whether it's positive or negative. It just says something happened and we need to pay attention. Both of these matter for motivation because they help your brain learn what's working and what isn't in real time. Now, part of this dopamine system is housed in the parahippocampal gyri, which is a key area for learning and memory. This is why feedback is so powerful. It gives your brain the necessary signals to update, adjust, and continue. Now, when a process gives your brain a clear expectation and fast feedback, it becomes a lot easier to stay engaged with that process. And it's not because you're forcing yourself, but it's because your nervous system knows how to work with the task. Now, onto why choice matters. So, super interestingly, neuroimaging studies show that even small, seemingly inconsequential forms of autonomy, like choosing the appearance of a stopwatch in a stopwatch task, can improve learning and performance during intrinsically rewarding tasks. So if you take all of this together, the research suggests that process motivation is supported by competence, autonomy and choice, optimal novelty, which is your challenge and information gaps, clear expectations, proximal goals, immediate feedback, and positive feedback. Now, the big question is, how do we translate this into real life? Well, the thing is, you have to make it a want, but you've got to make it realistic. So this is where we add in autonomy and choice. And no, not in that toxic positive social media advice way that preaches at you to, be glad that you get to do things rather than think that you have to do things. I am all for daily gratitude, but please, it doesn't really work like that. You may not get to choose whether a task needs to happen, but you can often choose aspects of how it happens. You can add things that make the process more tolerable or even pleasant. This is a strategy that's often called temptation bundling. Here are some things you might choose. You could choose what outfit to wear when you work out, or what podcast you listen to when you clean the bathroom, like this one. Or you can choose what flavor toothpaste you use when you brush your teeth. When you turn a have to into a get to, it doesn't have to be about gaslighting yourself. Your brain knows that you're lying to yourself, so just focus on adding a real sense of agency where you can. One caveat I'm going to add here is that you should limit yourself to 2 or 3 options, because too much choice quickly turns into decision paralysis, and you actually end up less satisfied when you have more choices. Another key thing is to make it quick and clear. Clarity and proximity really matter. The clearer the goal, or rather the clearer the strategy that you commit to, and the faster you get feedback, the better you learn. When the steps you choose to take in a process are clear, each one becomes a small, achievable unit with built-in feedback. You don't need to know everything in advance. You just need to trust that the information you need will arrive when you need it. This is why I like doing those follow-along dance workouts. Even if I've never done the routine before, I know that the instructions will come in real time, and I'll get immediate feedback based on whether I can correctly follow along or not. Now, all of this being said, sometimes the outcome actually does outweigh the process. I do still do things purely for the outcome. A seemingly trivial but very real example is when I get my nails done. I love it when my nails are done, but I really hate the process because it's a sensory nightmare. Just thinking about them filing the polish off my nails really makes me grind my teeth. But the outcome really matters to me. The gel polish protects my weak nails, it reduces snagging, and it helps prevent me from skin picking. Being confronted with process-averse tasks doesn't mean that you never do them. It just leaves you with 3 options. Number 1 is to minimize your exposure to the task by reducing the frequency or duration where possible. So in my case, I only get my nails professionally done once every 3 months, which is also helping me save money. And in the meantime, I maintain them myself. And I've also found a manicurist who gets the job done in 30 minutes, which is great because then I'm suffering for less time. Number 2, reframe the discomfort using cognitive reappraisal. You can think thoughts like, this discomfort is temporary, or focus on positive aspects of the task like, I'm glad I asked a professional to help me with my nails rather than always doing this myself. And number 3, practice acceptance. Personally, this is the hardest one for me because it does not leave you with any room to distract yourself. You simply try to sit with the feelings and perhaps think thoughts like, I don't like this and I can still do it. You don't have to give yourself a pep talk. So what are the takeaways here? Designing your life to include more enjoyable or tolerable processes where possible makes it easier to stay consistent with the things that matter. You can have fun with seemingly mundane things in your life. So using novelty, clarity, proximity, autonomy, and feedback, where could you redesign the process in these areas of your life? Think about your movement, your nutrition, your work or your studies, your hygiene, and your housework. Because life's too short to power through everything miserably. But it's also too short to neglect the things that keep us healthy. So focusing on the process is how I try to hold both in one place. If you made it to this point in the episode, I would love if you could drop your biggest takeaways down in the comments and share this with a friend or to your stories and tag me. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. And as always, stay curious, stay connected, and turn your potential into action.